It was an ordinary Monday afternoon in rural Missouri. Nothing unusual, no storms, no warnings. A passenger train was racing across the countryside, just as it had done hundreds of times before. Up ahead was a simple country road, a place most people would never think twice about. But in just a few seconds, that quiet crossing would tear apart lives, families, and an entire community. This is the story of what happened near Mendon, and how a moment at a forgotten railroad crossing became a deadly disaster. Mendon is a very small town in the central United States of America. According to the 2020 census, the town has a population of just 163 people. Mendon is located in the state of Missouri. The town lies approximately 82 miles or 132 kilometers east-northeast of Kansas City, and about 62 miles or 100 kilometers northwest of Columbia. The town lies along the Marceline section of the Southern Transcon, a major rail corridor stretching about 2,200 miles or 3,540 kilometers across the United States. This railway connects Los Angeles in California with Chicago in Illinois, making it one of the country's most important rail routes. The line was originally built by 3 different railroad companies. Today, it is owned by BNSF Railway, the largest freight rail operator in the United States, based in Texas. As is common across the country, the freight railroad that owns the tracks allows Amtrak to run passenger trains by renting time slots on the line. This creates an unusual situation where passenger trains often must give priority to slower, longer freight trains, even though both share the same tracks. The Southwest Chief is a long-distance passenger train operated by Amtrak. It carries passengers across the United States, stopping at 31 stations between Chicago and Los Angeles. On the day of the accident, the train was made up of 1 baggage car and 9 passenger cars, including 3 sleeping cars. With the exception of the baggage car, the entire train consisted of Superliner 2 passenger cars. These are bi-level cars designed for long-distance travel and include seating, sleeping, dining, and observation cars. At the time of the accident, the train was carrying 271 passengers along with 12 crew members, including the locomotive crew. The train was pulled by 2 General Electric Genesis P-42 DC locomotives, with unit number 133 in the lead and 166 following behind. The P-42 DC is a 4-axle diesel locomotive developed by modernising the earlier P-40 DC model, which was first introduced in 1992. Compared to many American locomotives of its time, the P-42 DC can be easily recognised by its more streamlined design. At the same time, travelling northbound on a local rural road was a 4-axle dump truck based on a Kenworth W900B, built in 2007. The truck had an empty weight of 14.4 metric tons and was carrying an unspecified load of construction aggregate such as sand or gravel. There was a single driver inside the truck. On June 27, 2022, the Southwest Chief was travelling eastbound through Missouri on its journey from Los Angeles to Chicago. By the time the train reached Kansas City, it had already been delayed by about 4 hours. Because of this delay, conductors informed passengers that many connecting trains would be missed and advised them to remain on board the Southwest Chief if it still matched their planned route. As a result, the train was unusually crowded. Passengers were instructed to stay in their assigned seats, while panorama cars were used to accommodate extra passengers and luggage that could not fit in the baggage car. Witnesses later reported that some passengers also chose to keep their luggage with them in various passenger cars. Aside from the delay and the crowded conditions, the journey had been entirely routine. Such delays are common for passenger trains in the United States due to shared use of tracks with freight railways, and nothing about the trip suggested that anything out of the ordinary was about to happen. Just after noon on June 27, 2022, A pair of dump trucks was travelling northbound through the rural area west of Mendon, Missouri. The trucks were carrying construction aggregate for a nearby construction project. The exact route they were taking is unclear, as the origin and destination listed in the official report would not normally require the trucks to cross the railway line. By approximately 12:35 p.m., both trucks were driving along Porch Prairie Avenue, a gravel road that runs north to south across the railroad tracks. This crossing is located about 3 miles or 4.8 kilometres southwest of Mendon, measured in a straight line. The crossing was passively secured, meaning it was equipped only with railroad crossing signs and stop signs. There were no flashing lights, warning bells, or crossing gates to alert drivers to an approaching train. At this location, the road and the railway intersected at a 45-degree angle, with the tracks cutting diagonally across the roadway. At approximately 12:41 p.m., the driver of the lead dump truck reached the crossing. He slowed down as he approached, but did not come to a complete stop. Investigators believe the driver likely looked to see whether the tracks were clear before continuing onto the crossing. As the Southwest Chief approached the crossing, the train driver sounded the horn, as required by trackside warning signs. From a distance of just over 1,320 feet, or 400 metres, he saw the leading dump truck approaching the crossing. Over the next 10 seconds, while the train continued at 89 miles per hour, or 143 kilometres per hour, just below the local speed limit, the driver sounded the horn 4 more times in an attempt to warn the truck. Despite these warnings, the truck continued to slowly move into the crossing. Realising that a collision was becoming unavoidable, the train driver activated the emergency brakes at 12:44 p.m., making a desperate and ultimately hopeless attempt to stop the train in time. Just 2 seconds later, the leading locomotive struck the rear left side of the truck at nearly full speed. The impact tore both the cab and rear assembly off the truck's frame. The force of the collision caused the locomotive to derail and rip apart the tracks beneath it, triggering the derailment of the rest of the train. Both locomotives came to a stop off the tracks, but remained upright. The baggage car stopped with a heavy lean to the right, while all of the passenger cars behind it overturned before finally coming to rest. The crash claimed the life of the truck driver and 3 people on the train, while 146 others were injured badly enough to require hospitalisation. A witness made the first call to emergency services at 12:45 p.m., just minutes after the crash. First responders arrived at the scene by 1:02 p.m. The wreckage was spread across the tracks and surrounding area. The dump truck had come to rest in a ditch beside the railway, completely destroyed. There was no chance of survival for the truck driver. Rescue teams recovered 2 victims from the train at the scene. A third passenger, who had initially survived the crash, was rushed to hospital but later died from their injuries. In total, 4 lives were lost as a result of the collision. The direct cause of the crash was quickly identified. The dump truck had entered a passively secured level crossing without fully ensuring that it could clear the tracks safely before the arrival of the train. Investigators later recovered the truck's speedometer from the wreckage. It was frozen at just 5 miles per hour, or 8 kilometres per hour, showing how slowly the truck had been moving as it entered the crossing. Investigators also recovered the train's onboard data recorder and forward-facing camera. This evidence confirmed that the train driver had been travelling within the permitted speed limit and had sounded the horn as required, and then several additional times, in an effort to warn vehicles approaching the crossing. On the day of the accident, the 2 dump trucks had already crossed the railway twice while fully loaded. The collision happened during the 3rd crossing. Because no train had appeared during the earlier trips, and possibly not on the return journeys either, this may have created a false sense of confidence that no train would be coming the next time. The investigation noted that the level crossing itself was poorly placed and poorly designed. The road crossed the tracks at a 45-degree angle, which forced truck drivers travelling northbound to turn their heads sharply to the left, almost looking behind them in order to see an approaching train. According to the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials, crossings should meet the tracks at no less than 75 degrees, and ideally as close to 90 degrees as possible. However, these guidelines are recommendations, not legal requirements. To better understand the visibility problem, investigators conducted a test on July 1, 2022, using an identical dump truck. The truck was positioned near the crossing, while an investigator watched for eastbound trains to determine when they became visible. The test showed that, to see a train by the time it reached the whistle sign about 405 metres from the crossing, the driver had to lean forward almost against the steering wheel. This was necessary to see past the truck's B-pillar, the structural frame behind the side window. Investigators concluded that a normal glance over the shoulder, while seated properly, was not enough to spot an approaching train in time. The whistle sign marked the earliest point at which an approaching train could be seen, as it emerged from behind bushes along the tracks. Even then, the train was only visible if a truck pulled almost all the way up to the crossing, stopping about 15 feet or 4.57 metres from the nearest rail. This is the closest distance at which Missouri law allows a vehicle to stop at a railroad crossing. If a driver stopped farther back, closer to 50 feet or 15 metres, which is also permitted by law, the train would remain hidden for much longer. Investigators also examined the condition of the road south of the crossing. They found a height difference of 39 inches or 99 centimetres within just 30 feet or 9 metres of the southernmost rail. By comparison, recommendations from the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials suggest a height change of no more than 3 inches or 7.6 centimetres over the same distance. Further measurements showed that the road approaching the crossing was not level for the final 152 feet or 46 metres before the tracks. The surface was uneven and marked by humps and potholes, making it difficult for heavy trucks to stop smoothly and safely before entering the crossing. The driver of the second dump truck witnessed the collision and later became an important source of information for investigators. He explained that the gravel road surface near the crossing was spongy, making it difficult for heavy trucks to maintain proper traction. Because of this, he said he usually avoided stopping on the steeper, stronger slope close to the tracks, as fully loaded trucks often struggle to start moving again from that position. Instead, he described a common practice of slowing down and nearly stopping much earlier, before the incline, and then slowly crawling uphill toward the crossing. This approach allowed drivers to maintain momentum while still being able to stop if they noticed an approaching train. According to the witness, this driving method was not unusual among truck drivers using that road. When investigators later showed him the recovered instrument cluster from the crashed truck, which displayed a speed of 5 miles per hour or 8 kilometers per hour and an engine speed of 1,100 revolutions per minute, the witness stated that these readings matched what he typically observed while carefully navigating the crossing himself. Another serious issue revealed by the investigation was the train's crash performance. While the locomotive largely absorbed the initial impact, passenger cars and the train remained mostly aligned as it derailed, 2 passengers died during the derailment itself, inside the cars, and a third later died in hospital after being pulled from the wreckage. In addition, more than 140 passengers were injured. Overcrowding and the presence of luggage in passenger areas did contribute to some of the injuries. However, a much more serious problem became clear once the train cars were lifted upright during the recovery operation. Investigators found that several exterior doors had collapsed inward during the derailment. Many windows had shattered, and others had been torn completely from their frames. 2 of the passengers who died were found in the lounge car near the middle of the train, in the entrance area of that car. Nearby, multiple windows had broken, and at least 1 exterior door had been forced inward, as the overturned car slid along the ground for nearly 0.25 miles or 0. 4 kilometres, soil and gravel ballast from the track was forced inside, effectively being scooped into the car. The 2 victims were discovered buried beneath a pile of soil and gravel approximately 4 feet or 1.2 metres deep. The coroner determined the cause of death to be compression asphyxia, meaning the victims were pinned by the material and were unable to breathe. The 3rd passenger died from blunt force trauma. It remains unclear where that individual was located inside the train, as their position was not documented before they were taken to hospital. Train car windows must be designed with a careful balance between strength and breakability. If the windows are too weak, they cannot withstand air pressure from tunnels or passing trains, and they may fail when a train car falls onto its side. This is an even greater concern for bi-level passenger cars, like those used on this train, because their tall and narrow design makes them more likely to tip over during a derailment. Those windows had been designed to withstand the pressure created when 2 trains travel past each other at 186 miles per hour or 300 kilometers per hour. In doing so, they became too rigid to allow quick access in an emergency. In the case of the Superliner, 2 passenger cars involved in the Mendon crash, investigators concluded that the opposite problem may have occurred. The evidence suggested that the windows may not have been strong enough to protect passengers during the derailment. At the time of the Mendon collision, the National Transportation Safety Board had just completed an investigation into another derailment involving a nearly identical train with a very similar outcome. Because of this, the NTSB repeated several recommendations from that earlier report in its findings on the Mendon accident. The main recommendation was that clear and mandatory performance standards should be created for how passenger train cars behave in a crash. These standards would apply to all passenger trains in the United States and would aim to reduce the risk of windows or doors becoming unintended entry points for dirt, ballast, and debris during a derailment. Investigators also called for better securing of what they described as potential projectiles. In this case, this mainly referred to luggage that could not fit into the baggage car and became airborne as the train overturned. Interestingly, the overcrowding of the train received little attention in the official report. However, it could still be seen as a contributing factor, as it resulted in more passengers being on board and led to luggage being stored in passenger areas rather than in the baggage car. The standard reliance on baggage cars also meant there was little to no intended space for larger luggage inside the passenger cars themselves. It remains unclear how many seats were available on the train and whether there were more passengers than seats. This lack of information may help explain why 2 of the victims were located in the entrance area of a train car, rather than in the main seating area at the time of the derailment. After the accident, the local government of Chariton County permanently closed the level crossing. Road access was blocked with wooden beams, and the crossing itself was dug up to prevent any future use. The crossing had been criticised multiple times in the past for its poor placement and unsafe design, and the accident appears to have been the final event that pushed local authorities to take action. The investigation concluded that the immediate cause of the accident was the truck driver failing to stop at the crossing and properly ensure that no train was approaching. Reports by the National Transportation Safety Board do not assign personal blame, and since the driver was killed in the collision, no legal proceedings were pursued against him. Despite this, the driver's widow filed a lawsuit against BNSF Railway, which owned the tracks and crossing, and against Chariton County, which owned the road. The lawsuit claimed that both parties were responsible for the crash and the driver's death because they had failed to close or properly redesign the crossing. This case was settled confidentially in March 2025, with the driver's family giving up their right to appeal. Additional lawsuits filed by survivors and relatives remain unresolved. These cases involve Amtrak over the crowded conditions on the train, BNSF Railway over the safety of the crossing, and MS Contracting, the company that employed the truck driver and operated the vehicle. As of July 2025, these cases are still ongoing. In the end, the Mendon crash was not caused by one single failure. It was the result of design choices, habits formed over time, and risks that had quietly become normal. We invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. What do you believe should have been done differently, and what lessons should never be ignored again?